Well, man, what an incredible podcast episode we have. We've got for you today not only someone who is in such high demand in the midst of a pandemic world, but also a dear friend. He is not only a pastor, he is a speaker, he's an educator. But what he's probably most known for is he went in the ministry as has a doctorate in psychology, a clinical psychologist, which every church staff probably needs. He was the former pastor of Hoffmantown out in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He's been on staff at the mega churches of Mega, but he's a dear friend, speaks to over 100,000 people each year in conferences and in session seminars. He's president and CEO of the Lowery Institute for Excellence. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in Dr. Charles Lowery. Welcome, Charles.
Hey, thanks for having me. You need a psychologist, I know, so it's going to be a good time. Just a little therapy. It'll be okay. You'll actually feel normal after being with me for a little while.
Everyone's asked, is this just a free session or are you having to pay your copay? And I was like, I'll see the receptionist when we're done.
That's right.
So I got to ask you, what in the world back many years ago got into your mind about being a psychologist?
Well, my dad was a pastor, so I grew up in church. And so I lived in a parsonage, and whoever thought of that is not a smart guy. And so I lived in a parsonage. I grew up I lived at the church. So I thought, these people need help. And so my dad was a country preacher, and, those monthly business meetings, they'd tell how sorry and no good he was. And I thought, God, I want to help people, but I'm never going to work for a Baptist church. You can forget that. And so he had me, of course, with a sense of humor. I ended up being at some of the largest ones in the country. But at the time, I thought, well, I'll be a psychologist. That will help people. Then that's what I pursued. I got a PhD. I was in private practice. I ended up going to work for my brother, who pastored a mega church, and I did children's church for him. And that's how I met Michael Catt. He was a student pastor, and I was the children's church guy. And then I was professor of psychology at Gardner-Webb University and ran their counseling center. And then First Baptist Dallas wanted to start a psychological counseling center. So they selected me to come. And so we picked up 3 small kids and moved from South Carolina to Dallas, Texas, downtown Dallas. And 2 years later, I was a Sunday night preacher for W.A. Criswell at First Baptist Church Dallas, and did that for about 5 years, and learned a lot. And that was really the first book of the Bible I ever preached to. I preached at First Baptist Church Dallas with W.A. Criswell sitting behind me. People say, well, how did you get to do that? I said, well, I'm just still doing children's church. It's just longer, It's still joke, point, illustration, and then end on Jesus. That's what you do. And so that's what I've always done, and God's always blessed it. And, being a psychologist, you have an insight into not only what Scripture is about for your church, but what it's about individually. People are hurting all over, and they want to know how to live. And the psychological training has helped take that and put God's word into their lives. And we're the light. And I always tell people the light means like a dark room. If you don't have the light, you're going to stumble over everything. And when people in the dark, they stumble over everything. So I shine the light for them. I say, hey, this is where you're going to stumble. If you got to go around this one, you got to watch this one. And so God's blessed that ministry. And then I went to Hoffmantown, and God blessed that. We baptized over 3,000 people. But I knew eventually I'd be on my own speaking around the country, because committees and churches, they go too slow for me. And so then we just started a ministry of speaking around the country. And I always knew I wanted to do that, because even as a psychologist, I didn't listen well. I got tired of listening. I thought one day I'm going to talk. I'm tired of hearing all this. And so, every story starts to sound the same. And they'd say something like this: the reason I'm a loser is because my dad's an alcoholic. And I'd say, well, maybe your dad's an alcoholic because you're a loser. There's another way of looking at it, right? Well, people won't pay for that, you understand. They're not going to pay for that. So I decided to move on, and that's when I started talking for a living. So now I get to talk full time.
Wow. And, we're talking pre-COVID world. You were on the road probably 200 days a year. That kind of took a back seat in 2020. I know you and I've talked. I mean, it was brutal.
It was all, I have what I call a no show, no dough job. So if
Mm.
I don't show, I don't get paid. So
Mm.
all of a sudden, everything just started to shut down, and we had to kind of reevaluate doing. And we sent some videos from churches and things like that. But hey, we just saw it as a vacation. Hey, uh, I got some time off. You're always wanting time off. You're thinking, well, man, if I could just have some time off, time with my family, relax. Look at the mountains or something. And then it happened, and then we griped about it.
Mm.
It's like, well, this is your answer. This is what you've been talking about. But that's the nature of man. As a rule, man's a fool. When he's hot, he wants it cool. When he cool, he wants it hot. Always wanting what's not. As a rule, man's a fool. I mean, you know that, don't you, Scott? As a
Mm.
rule, man's a fool. We always want what we can't have. And that's what I call it, your Adam suit. That's your body, and your Adam suit, it doesn't want to act better. It wants to feel better. It does not want to plan. It wants a pill. Does not want education. It wants medication. And your Adam suit's going to keep you from enjoying the life God's given you. And because you got to deal with it all your life. And your Adam suit's never going to get to heaven. God's got to kill it to get you to heaven. It's not going to make it.
Mm.
Your Adam suit cannot be redeemed. And that's what causes all of our problems, all of our psychological issues. And it affects our ministry. I mean, if you think about it, if you look in the Old Testament, you see that phrase, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It was supposed to be Abraham, Isaac, and Esau, but Esau couldn't control his Adam suit. He wanted what he wanted, and he wanted it right now. And that's the way we all are. And that will keep you from God's best in your life, because you got to learn to control it. And people say, well, we're Christians. We're the best. You're a pastor. Well, it doesn't matter. You still got Adam suit. Apostle Paul, greatest Christian ever lived. Apostle Paul, you know what he said about his Adam suit? Things I don't want to do, I do. The things I'd really like to do, I can't seem to do it. Now, that's not a teenager. That's the greatest Christian that ever lived. So what does that mean for me and you? That means we're in trouble. That means it's a constant struggle to make sure with this Adam suit, we keep it healthy. We keep it, because it's going to carry, it's not you, but it carries you around. So everything you do, you have to do through that Adam suit. So that's really what psychology is. It's teaching people how to get control of that so they can do spiritual things with that Adam suit. Because it's based on habits and background, and every Adam suit is different, and every dysfunction is different depending on how your Adam suit grew up and all the variables that are there. So that's pretty much, that's why I think people relate to what I say, because I put it in the real world. And I think what's happened is we really start to realize now that we don't preach a message. We are the message. We couldn't preach there for a while. We couldn't, well, let's go hear my preacher. Well, no, we are the message, and we have to decide. It's not going to church, it's being the church. And I think a lot of people realize during this pandemic, you're addicted to church. You're addicted to something we created, where you sing and you go in, you sit, and all that. Well, I just hope when Jesus comes back, he doesn't say, well, why did you do it that way? So if you're not careful, you get addicted to the church instead of Jesus and the things of the church. And I think a lot of people realize that, because if you think about it, a lot of Christians, they don't change. They just go to church and get more knowledge, and then they talk about how bad everybody else is, but they don't really change. And that's the key to life. Not anything changes unless you change. And if you're not careful, you will get addicted to the things of the church, where you go and you sing good music, you hear good preaching, and you feel good, and then you don't change, and you go back out in the real world, and your life's a mess, and you get depressed, so you want to go back to church. And a lot of people who are dysfunctional, they want to go to church all the time, because that's the only place they feel good. They don't know how to function in the real world, so they want to go to church all the time. Let's have another service. Let's do this. Let's go do that. And I think it's for pastors. We've also realized a lot of us get addicted to the crowds, because as you know, it's great fun to speak to a large crowd and everybody tell you how wonderful you are. But all of a sudden, there's no large crowd to speak to, and are you really wonderful? Well, then you got to decide, hey, well, I have to live a wonderful life. It's not about me speaking. It's about me being me.
Mm.
And that's a good, that really, it worked in a lot of ways to help us grow
Mm.
and see what's really important in life.
Yeah. Well, I've already discovered this is going to be the easiest podcast I've ever done because you set it on the tee and you just continue to drive it down the fairway. So thank you for that.
I do talk for a living, you know that. So.
Yeah. And you do it quite well. And so a lot of times though, when you were on the road, a lot of your sessions would deal with relationships, because that's, if our eternity is based on a relationship, everything in our life should be based on relationships. So twofold. One, give us a little overview of the power of relationships. Then I want to turn this because a lot of people don't know your deep relationship with most pastors that you go in that hire you to come in and do the sessions. You're actually going into being the pastor's encourager. And so how do you get pastors to open up? First of all, talk about the relationships and then kind of transition into how to be a pastor's best friend.
Well, life is relationships. I mean, I've worked with billionaires, I've worked with millionaires, I've worked with presidents of companies, I've worked with the Dallas Cowboys. They need a psychologist. And so I've worked with all these people. And it doesn't matter how many houses you own, how much money you have. If you're not happy in your relationships, you're not a happy person. I promise you. If you're not happy, you're not a happy person. Doesn't matter what success in life you have. So relationships are the key to life. Unfortunately, a lot of people, they don't know how to deal with other people. They don't have great relationships because we've never been taught. And so often our churches don't teach that. They quote a lot of scripture. They say don't get divorced, but they don't tell you how to stay married. And so what we do is we come in on a Sunday and try to win the Sunday morning crowd over to come back like at 4:00. So we can actually teach them some things. Churches want to do things backwards. They want to do a Friday, Saturday, weekend retreat. Well, that's fine, but you're going to get the people who don't need it. Those are the only people who will come on Friday and Saturday. The ones who need it are the Sunday morning crowd and mainly the men. And they're not going to come back at 4:00 unless they see a guy who can help them, encourage them, and teach them some things. So I hook them in the morning, get them to come back in the afternoon. And then we teach them some things. We got, hours to teach them how to get along, especially men, because men, research says that basically men have a half a brain. They did a research where they read a novel to men and women and they watched their brain. The whole brain of a woman lights up. Connectivity. You got two hemispheres and that corpus callosum in the middle, it was all lit up. A man listening, only one side of the brain lights up. Now, many women listen to this and thinking, I know I've been talking about husband for years. He's got a half a brain. Well, he does. In listening, that's why when you say to a man, let's talk, he's thinking, I'd rather have leprosy. He doesn't want to talk. He doesn't want that. And so you have to teach these guys how to communicate. And just little simple things like the word win, W-I-N. What happened? Inside how I felt. Next time, do this. And to a man, a man just wants to know what to do. He doesn't. Romance to a man means tell me exactly what to do. He doesn't know what to do. He grew up playing baseball, basketball, king of the hill, capture the flag, put a helmet on, seriously injure the other guy. That's how we grew up. Competition. That's how we grew up. And women don't understand it. My first vacation, my wife and I went on. She said, can we stop at the rest area? I said, not till I pass that Chevrolet. She said, what Chevrolet? Chevrolet passed me 30 miles back. I've been trying to catch ever since. That Chevrolet. That's how we grew up. Competition, And so women don't understand that, how we get so defensive when she asks what happened at work. We get so defensive about that because we think she's trying to find something about us and we get that competition. So we teach men and women how to communicate, the bottom line. And of course, while we're there, we're a huge encouragement to pastors because pastors need someone that they can be honest with. Okay. The problem with Christianity and churches is what we really focus on. It's better to look good than tell the truth. And if you're a pastor, you have to look good. You have to look good because they're not going to come to your church unless you look good. But underneath, there's a lot of that Adam suit. He's got a lot of issues he's dealing with. And we teach them, you got to learn to deal with that because once a pastor decides that I'm not human anymore, I don't need the things other humans need. In other words, I'm too spiritual to have fun. I'm too spiritual to have to do that, go off and play golf with my buddy. I'm too spiritual for all that. I'm doing God's work. Well, you will soon burn out. You'll end up, either a hot dog stand at the beach or running naked through the woods, bent over barking like a dog. I mean, you will not make it in the ministry. Once I heard Bill Hybel say this one time. He said, I was preaching the best sermons. People were coming to Christ. I was not a pound overweight. I had a quiet time and I was working out regularly, and I craved anything cheap and superficial. What he's saying was the Adam suit needed to be human, and I wasn't letting it. I was doing all spiritual things all the time. No one can do that. No one. You got to look at your humanness, and it'll be different for different people. I mean, what floats your boat won't float my boat. And so you got to know, how do I keep myself human and encouraged in this Adam suit so my spiritual suit can minister to people? And that's the key to being a successful pastor. And so many of them, they wait too late. They call me too late. It's sad, but just this past year, I had a pastor, and I knew he wanted to talk, and I knew he called me, and I was supposed to come there, and he bailed at the last moment. Next week, he committed suicide. He just waited. It just built up so much before he was willing to ask for help, because he knew that if I somehow asked, they're going to fire me. They're going to, the personnel committee finds out, they're going to fire me about this. So you got to have somebody you trust, somebody you can call. I tell everybody that you need friends in your life who can give you a good cheer, in other words, can encourage you. Truth without fear. And especially if truth is a key for a pastor, because truth rarely goes upward. It goes downward, but it barely goes upward. And I work with a lot of presidents of organizations, and what they need is the truth, but it rarely goes up to them. It goes down from them, but you don't tell your boss the truth. And so pastors, they don't get the truth a lot. So they need somebody to give them a good cheer. They need somebody that give them truth without fear. They need somebody to give them a listening ear, just to listen to them. What are you thinking about? They need somebody who give them a kick in the rear to say, hey, this is life. If you got a job without aggravation, you don't have a job. You have a hobby. That's not a job. So you got to tell them, hey, you got to get out there and keep doing what you're supposed to be doing. And then you need this, and this is crucial: a sensitive tear. You need a friend you can cry with. And men need that. There's some bad things are going to happen. I mean, and eventually we're all going to die. I mean, one day you're, a peacock, next day you're feathers. It's over. And the people you love are going to die. And so we need to understand there's some people we need to cry with. And we have a friend, you and I both, Griffin Jones. His wife passed away, and sometimes Griff would call me and we'd just cry. Just cry, because we couldn't pray. We started to pray, we'd start crying, and I'd say, Griffiths, we just need to cry. We need to pray. We need to cry. And then he called, in the first vacation, he said, could you help me plan my vacation? Because Donna and I have been married all these years. I can't even remember a vacation without Donna. But the church has given me 4 weeks off. I don't know what to do. Could you and Penny help plan my vacation? See. So we need friends like that who will help us get through the hard times in life. And pastors need it more than anybody.
Yeah. Before we, let me ask you one other question about that. As a leader, most of the time, most leaders live with a fear of vulnerability. How can a leader ask for help without thinking to his or herself that they're going to lose their job, they're going to lose their status, they're going to lose their position of leadership? Because let's face it, we live in a messed up world. We're all messed up, but a lot of us in leadership are afraid to ask for help.
Yeah. You have to find someone that you believe in, that you can trust, who has confidentiality. I mean, I've seen so many pastors, they went to staff member, they went to somebody, and then the staff member goes to the personnel committee, they're fired. So if you're a pastor, and this might not sound spiritual, but paranoia is a little healthy, because I've seen so many pastors destroyed when they admit, that they have an issue or whatever, because they want their pastors to be perfect. They put them on this pedestal. And so you need to develop a relationship with somebody, hopefully another pastor or a psychologist that's outside your church, that you feel trust and that you can just be honest with. The pastor can't be honest with his people. You just can't. It's just it doesn't work that way. They want you to be this pastor. They don't want you to be their friend. They don't want you to be the one that you dump on. You're their pastor. That's a whole different thing than being a friend. And you need a friend outside the church that you can talk to and be totally honest with.
Yeah. You and I have talked about this. There's just a spike in counseling needs around the country. So how do you find if you're a leader, or let's just say this, if you're in church, one, do you kind of adhere that people need counseling and that's okay? And where would you go find it?
Well, that's the difficult part, because we really need, and of course, Rick Warren did a great job with Celebrate Recovery and all those things, because the research actually says that for most people, now there's some severe people that need psychologists, they need medication, they need lots of other stuff. But for most people, talking to a friend does just as well as a professional, especially if you have a way of training these people to learn how to listen, to learn how to talk to people and develop a relationship of trust. The research says, hey, you don't have to have all this training. I mean, matter of fact, a lot of these people who are so trained, the guy that taught me marriage counseling in my doctoral program was on his third marriage. He didn't have a clue. Just because somebody has a doctor's degree in psychology doesn't mean they have a clue. Matter of fact, in this country, I learned you can go out there if you're an MD and mess up. If you mess up as an MD, people will sue you. If you take out the wrong organ, you get sued. But you can go back then and do a 3-year residency in psychiatry, which nobody knows what that is. And then you can become a psychiatrist. So I learned during that network of working with people, a lot of incompetent people become psychiatrists. Unfortunately, that's sad, but they do.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Well, let me ask you this, and we're going to come back to it later again, but if someone out there, we have a lot of pastors that listen, a lot of church leaders that listen and watch, how would they get in touch with Charles Lowery? Well,
they can just go, we have a website, charleslowry.com. So that's pretty easy to go on there and then just say, if they want me to talk to them or whatever, if they want me to come speak at their church, so you can do that, through the website.
Okay.
I don't, being a psychologist, I don't give my phone number out to everybody. So, because there's thousands of pastors in the world, I never sleep. So, some people do have my phone number, and I tell them never give it to a deacon, because, growing up in that parsonage, I believe Jesus went around healing, doing miracles and casting out deacons. So, never give it to a deacon. But, they just go on our website and we'd contact them and love to help them.
Yeah, well, we've had you at our President's Summit and so many other areas. You and I have been together. Every time you hit a home run, you seem to really understand not only what you do in your sessions, being a former pastor, where I think you have a pastor's heart, you get what's going on. Like, we're in a paradigm shift right now. And so if I were to ask you, in this post-pandemic world, what do you see are going to be the biggest changes that church leaders better be aware of?
Well, I think they have to be aware that habits are powerful. And once you can watch something online, and actually you can be helped online. I mean, we're helping somebody right now. So there is a value to that. And so what we're going to have to decide is, what other value do we offer by them actually coming to the church? And that's what we really got to work on, because otherwise they're not going to come back. So we got to really work on that connectivity. We have to work on, in our small groups, actually giving them information and investing in them in order for their life to be better. And I think we're going to get a lot away from a lot of knowledge where people know where Thyatira is, and they know, in Revelation they said that. I promise you, they're not coming back for that. They need to, how? I got a teenage daughter that's depressed. I'm afraid she's suicidal. My marriage is on. You're going to have to really decide, what is the church about? Are we really just knowledge oriented and teaching more and more knowledge? Or are we people oriented? And I think we're going to have to get people oriented, because about knowledge can be on a screen, and so we got to connect. And I think what we're going to find is in the real world, you never convict anybody till you first connect with them. You got to connect first, and we got to teach our people how to connect, because most of them, they don't know how to do that. They don't know how to. We used to do power lunch in Hoffmantown every month, where we invited business people, and I had to tell the church people, you just act as normal as you can. Try to be normal. Don't talk about your church. Try to talk about things real people talk about, like the weather and ball games, because these people think you're weird. They think you're weird. And so convince them you're normal, and then I will hook them, and we can actually win them to Jesus. But you're going to have to be pretty close to normal. All right. And we've created a lot of people who aren't. They're you can read the Bible every day and be nuts. I promise you.
Well, I think before the pandemic, you're probably the one that taught me this, is that the church had developed transactional leadership. Everything was a transaction. And what we've got to rediscover is a relational leadership, that everything's about relationships. And again, goes right into your sweet spot. So now there's through a point of personal preference, Michael Catt, he said, you've got to ask Charles about Brianne trying to teach her how to ride a bike. And the principle there is to stay focused.
Yeah. What happens in your Adam suit is you always focus on the negative. That's just the way your Adam suit is. And it happens from a very early age. So I use my example of my daughter, Brianne, who's now actually going to lecture at Dartmouth Medical School this year. We're pretty proud of her. Wow. And so I took her to Wet and Wild Water Park the fall of the year. I said, Brianne, look at this asphalt. You're going to be a bike rider. You're going to learn how to ride, and you're going to go fast. I had to ride on sand and rocks. You're going on asphalt. You're going to feel the wind against your face. You're going to be a bike rider. Well, Brianne says, oh, look at that. And then she says, what is that way down there? I said, well, that's a pole. She said, what if it hit the pole? I said, I got the pole, Brianne. Look at all this asphalt. You're going to be a bike rider. She said, what if it hit the pole? I said, you're not going to hit the pole. Get on a bicycle. And you know how to teach a kid how to ride a bike. You're running like crazy. You feel the wind against your face. I said, Brianne, you're a bike rider. She said, what if it hit the pole? You're not going to hit the pole. Go. And I let her go. And she heads straight for the pole. I mean, straight for the pole. She's screaming, Daddy, I'm headed for the pole. I said, turn it to the right. Look at all that asphalt. Turn it. I can't turn to the right. I'm headed for the pole. Turn it to the left. Look at all that asphalt. Turn. She mutilated that pole. I got there, tears in her eyes, lips stuck out. I told you I was going to hit the pole. I said, I know, Brianne, because you focused on the pole. And that's what I tell people. You know what most of your problem is in life? You're a pole hitter. That's what you are. You're a pole hitter. And there's poles in everybody's life. There's something wrong with everything. Something wrong with me, something wrong with you, something wrong with your car. You don't know it yet. There's something wrong with everything. And if you're not careful, that's what you focus on. And that's really when I was at Hoffmantown, we started a Saturday night church. And there were a lot of just ex-Catholics. They called me Father Lowery, said that was a great mass, but we won thousands of people to Christ. It became our fastest growing service on Saturday night. And they didn't know if I was doing it right or wrong. They just knew they found Jesus, and now they have a job. Now they have furniture, their life has changed. They were just happy, it didn't matter what song it was. They just happy. They just happy. And then I came back at 9:30 when I called the classic service. That was where people, then it was, choir and all the stuff we've been doing for 40 years. And for the Saturday night was casual and, easy. And it was like night and day. I mean, the attitude was totally different. I mean, the classic crowd, it's too loud or it's too quiet. I couldn't hear. It's too hot. It's too cold. Flag day, flag wasn't big enough. Prayer day, prayer wasn't long enough. I mean, just stuff. And here's what I thought in my mind. It hit me one night as I was walking into classic service. I said, I got to go back and tell those Saturday night people, don't come back to church anymore. Because in 30 years, you'll end up like those people. And nobody wants to be like those people. And that's when I realized we're doing something in church that we better watch it, because we're creating a lot of church people, but not a lot of Jesus people. And that's when I decided, hey, I don't think I can do this anymore. And that's when I went on the road.
Wow.
So
I guarantee you, there were some ahs and some ouches and gasp when you just went through that last point. So let's unfold that a little bit for pastors. How can you help a pastor to keep his people from being church people and keep them being Jesus people?
you got to focus on outreach. That's why when you go to the hospital, the baby section, everybody's happy, new births. And that's what you got to do with the church. It's all, see, discipleship, we've sterilized and pasteurized discipleship. Discipleship is you win somebody to Jesus and then they ask you questions. Well, what about this? Well, I don't know. I'll go find out. And then you go find out, well, this is this way, and we've lost that. We've lost that personal touch. At Hoffmantown, we let all of our lay people baptize, because if you led somebody to Christ, we let you baptize them because you're responsible for them. You're the one that's going to pour into that person. We've taken church staff and put it, you do all the work. No, it's all about us. This is what we do. We disciple these people. We teach them how to live. And that's one of the keys. Teach them how to live the Christ life with that light. We've got that light. Remember that there's a dark room. We got a light, and that light will open it up for all these people. But that has to be the main emphasis, because if you're not careful, it's like anything else. The church becomes for the people who are there. Yet Jesus pretty much made it clear the church is for people who aren't there yet. And that's you got to constantly keep that in mind. And if you don't keep that in mind, you'll get unhealthy and you'll get dysfunctional. And we have a lot of those churches out there.
Well, and what you're saying is basically going back to that counseling mindset of just being able to talk with someone. 30 years ago, that was a form of discipleship that we were just building into people's lives. And all of a sudden, through transactional leadership, everything is show up at this time, leave at this time, get on with your life. And we have big congregations, but no community in our local churches. So
we got a lot of programs, but they're not about the people. And if we could just get back to that discipleship, because that's what counseling is. It's just teaching people how to live. That's discipleship, teaching people how to live. This way isn't going to work. This way is going to work. This way will last. There's certain things you can do, but it won't last. You can skydive, without a parachute once, but if you want to do it twice, you might want to get a parachute. And so it's about life and teaching. This is what works and this is what doesn't work. And we're getting so far away from that in Christianity. We're getting so theological, and our seminaries are turning out a lot of academic guys with theology, but they don't know how to teach people how to live. And that's crucial. That's crucial.
Wow. I would even go one step that kind of parallels with that is worship. People are trying to survive through the week. Have worship that makes them where they think they're going to survive. And they think they're going to make it.
Yeah. Have some energy there. People come to church a lot of times for energy, for spiritual energy. And it's interesting in life. Many things in life, you will forget what you heard, but you'll remember how you felt. They actually had a guy who had no short-term memory whatsoever. He couldn't remember anything. And so this psychologist was working with him, and he did a little experiment because he shook hands with him every day. and have to introduce himself because he had no short-term memory. He had to introduce him every day. So he got this idea, even though he has no short-term memory, does he have feeling that he remembers? And so one day he shook his hand and he had a like a needle in there that would prick the guy. And so he pricked him when he shook his hand and the guy jumped back. The next day he went to shake his hand and guess what? The guy jumped back. There was feeling there, even though he had no memory, short-term memory. So that means feeling and memory are another part of the brain. That's why I tell these nursery workers and children's people, make sure you remember. They will forget what you said at church, but they will never forget how they felt at church. And there's a lot of people out there who they don't want to go to church and they can't even tell you why. I'll tell you why. Because as a kid, somebody made them feel uncomfortable. Somebody was mean to them, and that's where it comes from. So you gotta be very much aware, not just of the cognitive, but the emotional part. And worship really, and we got to get back to worship is really teaching people how to live. I mean, it is. I mean, we think worship is singing songs. I mean, if you think about it and you read the New Testament, you'll realize Jesus maybe never sang a song. I mean, think about it. He was at a place one time where they sang, and maybe he did. All right. But we have no record really of saying Jesus sang a song. Now, you would think if it was really that important that you'd say, hey, Jesus sang a song. Not only, so we've made songs, we fight about songs, which ones we sing, which ones we can't sing. And we think, and we even call the guy that sings a song the worship leader, because you sing songs. Well, that's how people get addicted to church, because our music is so good that they want to come and they want to feel good emotionally, but cognitively, they don't do anything any different when they go out. So I believe worship is not only, praising the Lord. See, worship, those songs focus you on God, and that's good. That's worship. But then that's emotional. Then you got to get the cognitive. Now, what do I do about that? And I think that's true worship, because, people deserve love my wife, when she needs loves the most, when she least deserve it. And I got to see the way I treat her as an act of worship, or I can't do it. I can't keep that up. And so we have to expand how we look at worship.
Wow.
And take it back out to the street.
Yeah. Again, your insight is really very intriguing. I enjoy every conversation we have. I love when we get together to play golf, you and me and Michael, and we just Hayes needs to join us. Hayes, if you're listening, this is Scott.
Hayes need to be with us. Yeah, but you saying you've seen better swings on condemned playgrounds. That wasn't very nice last time you played.
Well, for someone who we need to get you over to Scotland, because you always need to go to Scotland. Remember, I asked you to go to Scotland.
A friend of mine named Scott Dawson, who said he was going to take me before I died. So I'm still waiting. They're putting the tombstone, so get on the job there.
Well, before we go, I want to make sure that everyone knows you're available to come in, not only local churches, but conferences. You do relationships, anything about success in life, how to be successful in life.
We do relationships, and then usually we come back the second year and we do the Myers-Briggs with couples, because churches, again, that we haven't invested enough in letting people understand how God made them. And if you never know how God made you, you'll always try to impress people with what you do instead of serve out of who you are. And it's amazing to me that even a lot of pastors, they don't know what their strengths and weaknesses are. So we come in, we do the Myers-Briggs with couples, teach them, hey, he's not doing this because he's mad at you. This is how God made him. And so we have people come and say, I wish I'd have done this 30 years ago. And the church has got to start investing in those kind of things. And it's a psychological test, but hey, it's spoiling the Egyptians. We take what we can use from the secular world, as long as it doesn't violate biblical principle. So I can make it come alive to people. And then I usually stay over and do a session with the staff, because a lot of the staff, they don't realize that I take somebody and say, hey, write your name with your non-dominant hand. if you're right-handed, write it with your left hand. And they do it. And I say, well, that wasn't very good. And you were pretty stressed, weren't you? And they say, yeah. I said, well, that's what life is like when you're trying to live in your weaknesses instead of your strengths. And lots of people, they never even examine themselves to know what am I weak at? What am I strong at? And then how do I team up with people to make me and our team the best? So we do that too with a lot of churches.
Yeah. And I will say for anyone that's not listened to you on a Sunday or been in one of your sessions, what always grabs me is how you can take a word and take each letter and make it such a biblical principle in your life. You did it with win earlier. I've seen you do it with probably every word that we can come up with.
That's how my mind works. So I've got about 30 words in my head, and I know what each goes with each. Like the word balance, I can tell you right now, I'll go through that whole word and teach you how to live life based on balance. That's just the way my brain works. So, and I found out that's how people remember. They remember that. That hey, B stands for boundaries. What are the boundaries in my life? A stands for authentic. Am I being an authentic person, or am I just faking this thing? So, and we go through the whole. We got a lot of words out there we use. If
y'all want to hear the rest of balance, you got to invite him to your church or get involved with him. So, well, thank you so much for your time, your insight. Man, it's been encouraging. It's been challenging. It's been very intriguing. And hopefully, if you're a church leader, if you're someone that has influence in your church, make sure you reach out to Charles. Give my love to Penny. I know you guys are now back out in Texas, and
we're in Texas. Yeah, it's my wife just had to get back to Texas. It's not pretty, but it's Texas.
Yeah. So. It's the only place I know that you can have 12 inches of snow one day and 72 degrees the next day.
Oh, I know. Yeah, we tried to go back to our roots, but it didn't work. Sometimes you go back to your roots, remember why you left in the first place. So,
yeah, I wish we'd utilized you more when you were in Pigeon Forge, man. Now I've got to fly you all the way out from Texas.
Hey, I'm worth it, man. You can do it. You can afford it.
Oh my goodness! Hey,
okay.
Thank you so much.
Scotland now, okay? We're on.
We're on. Thank you so much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. That's Charles Lowery, President and CEO of Lowery Institute for Excellence, Life Inc. You can go to charleslowery.com and get all the information. Again, you need to get him in your church, at your conference, you will not be disappointed. Please listen to me. Get him today. It's incredible. We'll be right back. This is Scott Dawson with Dawson Now.